Hello. Welcome back to the P2P Soap Box. I'm your host and P2P BFF, Marcy Maxwell. We are continuing our series of bringing to you some of the most in-demand topics and presenters from this year's Peer-to-Peer Forum conference. And this week's topic comes from the ever-popular Endurance and Challenge Summit. In this summit, we tackle the unique strategies needed to support those who are raising money while training for and running in a marathon, a half marathon, triathlon, or some other long-distance event. And now, while I, for one, cut my teeth in the world of walks, I am well aware that these endurance events present their own distinct set of challenges and opportunities. For example, with a walk, the majority of participants might engage with our event community for 4 to 6 weeks, if we're lucky. But on the endurance side, we see a much longer engagement window. Participants are signing up early to ensure access to the coveted race bibs, and they're committing to a 4 to 6 month training regimen. This means we have both the opportunity to cultivate really robust relationships with them, and also the challenge of actually keeping them involved over a longer period of time. Additionally, while walk participants might be motivated by the community and the mission, endurance participants are also motivated by their own physical challenge. For many participants, the commitment required both physically to run a marathon and in fundraising to achieve a set minimum can be really daunting, especially for first-timers. And as nonprofits, it's easy to focus our communication solely on fundraising goals and our mission. But in doing so, we may overlook a crucial aspect of supporting the individual athlete in their personal journey. So my guest today is the perfect person to help dive into this nuance. I am really excited to be joined by Lindsey Deane Ratchford, the National Director of Team World Vision, a peer-to-peer fundraising arm of the global humanitarian organization World Vision. World Vision USA is a global Christian humanitarian organization that works in nearly 100 countries around the world, helping lift families and communities out of extreme poverty. They are the leading non-governmental provider of clean water on the planet and the #1 distributor of food for the World Food Program. Wow. And with 22 events domestically and 11 internationally, Team World Vision has raised more than $100 million to further their mission. And in 2023, they ranked as number 25 on the U.S. P2P Top 30 list. So in our conversation today, Lindsey and I will dig into how they are crafting their communication journey with the fundraiser at the center, their needs, their motivations, their fears, and how you can drill down these big overarching ideas into a cohesive and comprehensive multi-channel messaging strategy. We'll talk about the power of vulnerability and empathy in building these peer-to-peer relationships, as well as how to segment your messaging strategies for different demographic audiences. I know I left this conversation ready to move mountains, and I know you will too. So let's jump right in to my conversation with World Vision USA's Lindsey Deane Ratchford. Lindsey, welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you.
Oh, it's so good to be with you.
Or should I call you LDR? I know that's who you're known as the industry a little bit.
It is. It's a funny thing. You know, you go from names to initials. I don't know exactly what that means, but I take it, hey. As long as it's in good spirit, I'll respond.
I love it. So happy you're here. I would love to just kind of start with a little bit about your personal and your professional journey that's led you to your role at World Vision USA and kind of running the Team World Vision program.
Yeah. We all have our backstories and we shorten them up to an elevator pitch, basically. But I grew up in a pretty diverse suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, and we were kind of the underdog high school and city that, due to our diversity, I think people had a lot of presumptions about us and who we were and what we could do. And I had an incredible upbringing that was just so rich with lots of different people from lots of different places and walks of life. And we really stood together and accomplished a lot of great things through a lot of different adversity. And I had coaches and teachers that were always in my corner. So I think growing up, I wanted to be that for people. My undergrad is in education, and I taught and I coached for a while. And that actually led me to living overseas for a handful of years and teaching and coaching in La Paz, Bolivia, in an international school, which was a really incredible experience. Being really surrounded by this international community from all over, but in one of the poorest countries in South America, landlocked, and just really being exposed to global poverty for the first time. And while I was very accustomed to domestic U.S. poverty, growing up again in the just a very diverse background, yet seeing global poverty for the first time really broke my heart and shook me up in a way that no one should be defined by their circumstances. So fast forward, I found myself in graduate school studying intercultural studies and international development. And a good friend from my undergrad called me and asked me to run a half marathon with her, to which I had a 2-letter answer, Marcy. I think you probably understand what that answer is. But she just broke it down for me. She was engaged to a guy named Ryan, and they had been looking for houses. And she said, Lindsey, I just found out he's cheating on me. Yeah. And like the look on your face was the look on mine and my heart. And just, she said, Lindsey, I need a friend and a goal to get out of bed in the morning. And I choose you. So my 2-letter answer, became a 3-letter answer. And she was in Michigan. I was in California. And I also have a really bad back, chronic back problems. So Marcy, I didn't know if I could get to the start line, let alone the finish line. But I knew that I just needed to move for Sarah. And so she trained in Michigan and I trained in California, and I started with walking 20 minutes and then jogging 20 minutes and got a gym membership. And during that period of time, while I was moving for her, something dramatically changed in me. And it was 9 months later after crossing that finish line. I really thought crossing that finish line, like, if I can be doing this, what else? Like, what else can I be doing? Or what else should I be doing? I just felt like I was limiting myself. I just didn't think that I had the capacity to do something like that. And 9 months later, I met a guy named John Huddle from World Vision and found myself having a cup of coffee with this guy. And he asked me my story, and I told him about Sarah. And he said, hey, what if I told you that those miles that changed your life could literally save lives in places like Africa and all over the world, in these communities that don't have clean water? And I really couldn't wrap my brain fully around what that meant. But after living in Bolivia, I knew that he was right, and I knew that I could move there and not help all that much, but maybe help solve it. So long story short, got on board as an intern, making about $20 a day, recruiting everybody I knew. My best buddy, her boyfriend, and created me a shirt that said, see you at the marathon, because everybody I talked to, I was inviting to run LA Marathon. But yeah, 10 years later, I came on board as just exploratory markets, trying to grow our program all across the West Coast, to then taking over the Western region of the country, to now I oversee our national program across the country. So it's been pretty wild, but really incredible to see how life has kind of placed me in this position where running can correlate with development and really empowering people to really break them out of these broken circumstances to allow them to live lives to the fullest.
Okay, now I feel like I'm limiting myself, right? I just feel inspired always hearing from you. There's always so many great stories of people who start off as participants, right? They start off as a runner or a cyclist, or just coming to the walk and volunteering every year. And just, the last episode we had, that's exactly the 2 development professionals we had from Cure SMA. They're like, we started as teenage walkers in our Relay for Life program, and now this is what we do as our career. So I always think that has such a great mindset, which I know is what we're going to kind of talk about today, about centering the participant experience. But for those who aren't familiar with World Vision and with Team World Vision, can you just share a little bit about organization, program, and really how Team World Vision has grown to be one of the largest endurance peer-to-peer programs in the country?
Yeah, it has been a wild ride. We are 19 years. This will be our 19th year of ministry, we would call it. We're a faith-based organization, and we move by faith. We fundraise by faith. And actually, it was a guy back in 2006, Michael Chitwood, who had just lost his dad. And, you know, how you're saying kind of our stories kind of work us into this place that it becomes our professions or our vocations. But Michael had lost his dad suddenly. His dad went in for a routine shoulder surgery and never came out of the hospital. And that really rocked clearly his life, his faith, his world. And a friend called him and said that he was going to run Chicago Marathon. He didn't actually ask Michael to run Chicago Marathon. He just called him and said he was going to. And he came out of that conversation and told his wife, I think I'm going to run the marathon. And she didn't laugh him out of the living room. She supported him and said, let's go get it. Like, you can do this. And he lost probably 60 pounds, Marcy. And he said that training for that marathon really rebuilt his physical, mental, and spiritual health. And it was after he crossed that finish line, before he crossed the start line, he said, I'm going to do something like this every year. And I've got to. And when he was training after that, he was looking around and seeing that there are all these organizations that are funding research and really good causes, but there was none in the humanitarian sector, none giving immediate funding or aid to some of the most vulnerable people in the world. You know, more people die of lack of access to clean water than AIDS or malaria combined. Than all the warfare that's happening in the world right now. More people are dying from water-related illnesses. And Michael's dad, who'd passed away, was very invested into Haiti and training educators. So Michael had seen extreme poverty, and he just thought, what if I can put these two things together and we can really make a difference? So that was 2006. And he ended up with 100 runners that first year. He petitioned all of these organizations, and World Vision was the only one that called him back. And they were like, okay, sure, give it a shot. But they had about 100 runners, raised about $100,000. And they said, whoa, well, what if we could do this for the next 3 years? What do you think you could do? So Michael was the first employee. And fast forward, like I said, now 19 years later, we have 22 domestic events. We have 11 invitational events that are all around the world. We have a global 6K walk program. And we've seen over 100,000 people cross half and full marathon finish lines. And we've raised well over $100 million. So it really has been this incredible experience that, again, I think a lot of us have come to this point with significant life change, and we want to see that life change in other people, and that just unlocked in people to recognize I can do hard things, and the hard things that I can do can relieve some hard things from other people's lives.
I love everything that you're saying. And I think there's something always so special, specifically with endurance and training for marathons. Walks are fantastic and amazing fundraisers, and that's the world that I come from. But I think, to your point, when you're coupling a really intense physical challenge that isn't just one day, it's a good 12, 16 weeks or longer of training when people make that physical commitment, and to couple it with a fundraising commitment. I have a friend right now who just signed up for New York Marathon because her father's been diagnosed with leukemia, and she's, raising money with the team and training team over at Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And I know that even though she's run them before, it's going to be even more meaningful when she's pairing kind of her physical sacrifice with what she's doing in honor of her dad. And I think when you've got this long campaign, right? And you have people signing up for a lot of different reasons at a lot of different levels of fundraising expertise, running expertise, it becomes really critical to think about kind of your communication, right? How are you coaching people along the way throughout all of this? And I know you and I talked about this. You joined us at our conference and talked about how Team World Vision has really undergone a total overhaul of your fundraiser communication, your runner communication. Can you walk us through some of the key messaging changes that you've made and what has been the response from your participants?
Yeah, I think we've really doubled down, to be honest, on the things that we've known are true. From Michael never running a marathon in his life, prior to this role, I had never run a marathon in my life. And that's, I think, pretty kind of unique to Team World Vision. 80% of our folks have never run a 5K when they sign up to say yes to a half or full marathon. So there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of nervousness. And like you said, when you really think about someone stepping into a space on behalf of someone else, it's a really powerful thing that takes us out of our own existence and really pushes us into new space. So that's really the center and the heart of our communication. When I said yes, I got a weekly email every Tuesday from that man I told you about, John Huddle, who I had coffee with every Tuesday. Boy, he would send me an email, and friends, on Monday night, I was ready to open my email because I was scared about the run on Saturday. I didn't know how to raise money. I didn't want to talk about money, but I knew that if I could, that kids would never walk for water again, right? Like, we know that these causes, when we're raising these funds, they're going to good measures and good solid solutions, to really help improve the world. So we basically, through our communication, have really looked at, like you're saying, the entire journey and how are people feeling. And we think that centering the participant and John talking to my heart and my fears and my anxieties were crucial to get me through. And we really think the superpower or the super tool is empathy. So in all of our communication, the participant is centered, not the organization. It's not about us, right? It's about the person who's choosing us and choosing this journey. And we get to go along the journey with them, really addressing fears and roadblocks, encouraging them holistically. And we come alongside, like you're saying, Mercy, from a fundraising perspective, a missional perspective, also a training perspective. And I think really coming out of COVID, recognizing that people are isolated, people are lonely. Our health mentally, physically has been all over the place, and we're looking for something stable. We're looking for community. We're looking for purpose, and so those are some really big themes that we've really plugged in to make sure that people know that what they're doing and who they are matters.
I remember I have a really vivid memory of kind of when this switch flipped for me, and it was, years ago now. And it was when I was working with a children's hospital, and a mom was fundraising, and she was I don't want to say a needy fundraiser. She was one that would call all the time with questions. And at first I was a little annoyed. I was like, oh my gosh, she's calling me again. What does she want? Like, and then we finally, we met in person. And one of the things she said to me is, she goes, I feel so vulnerable putting my request out there, asking people to support me, asking people to make a donation. And what if they don't? What if they choose not to support me? And it was such a switch that flipped for me, for people that, we do this all the time. We ask for people to give money all the time, and we get used to the no's or the unopened emails, right?
Yeah, that's right. The ghosting, the silence.
Yeah, but that's really scary, especially for somebody who might be so close to the mission. This was a mother of a patient actively in treatment, feeling like, what if people don't respond? And so I love what you said about, kind of approaching it from a place of empathy, and how do we help them overcome this? It's a little theoretical, right? So how does that manifest in your emails, in your communication, your resources? Like, how do you take those big ideas of, we want to help you and treat this with empathy? What does that actually look like in some of your messaging?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, like you're saying, it's also personal, and us recognizing that people are stepping through fear and acting courageously with vulnerability, inviting people like to give their money, and also that they haven't necessarily, even if, like you're saying, whether it's a 5K or in our case, it's a 6K, because that's the average distance someone walks for water in the developing world, that we like to live lives of comfort. And when you become a peer-to-peer fundraiser, when you become an advocate for someone else, you're stepping out of your comfort zone all the time. So basically in our communication every week, we were asking ourselves, what's the scariest thing that could happen? What's the scariest thing that someone's going to be doing this week, right? So, and we're looking at it from a fundraising perspective, from a training perspective, and really saying, okay, Marcy, you're at the beginning of your journey. The scariest thing is just to say you're doing it, because after you say you're doing it, you're in, and, or even you can say it, but are you registered for the race, right? So really thinking about, like you're saying, practical, small steps we have a 26-week training plan. So over basically 30 weeks from, before the training starts to all the way through and post the training, emails, social media, text messages, so that we can holistically come alongside people where they are in the space that they're in, through the mediums that they are receiving communication. And I think that's the trickiest, right? Is there are so many ways to receive communication, this being one, the podcast being one of them, right? How do people receive their information now, and what's valuable to them? And again, we try to keep it as short and sweet as possible, and really giving people tools for their tool belt, and encouragement along the way. So I think tools and encouragement in a timely form, like we're saying,
Well, I feel like, didn't you say y'all were inspired by like pregnancy emails,
Yes.
pregnancy apps of counting down, your baby is the size of a blueberry, your baby is the size of an avocado.
Yes, absolutely. And that actually, so over this 26 weeks, one of our staff members was, when we were looking at all of this and really overhauling everything, she was receiving those emails, and basically they get ahead of the crazy, right? It's like, oh my gosh, why am I feeling like this? Oh my gosh, am I losing my mind? Oh my gosh, like physically, mentally, what's happening? And so we really kind of took that approach week by week to get ahead of, you might be feeling some aches and pains. You might be more tired this week. You might be really thirsty, and so insert rest, insert the importance of a rest day, insert the importance of a strength day, insert the importance of cross training or hydration, and then connecting, in our case, hydration to the actual work that you're funding. So really, again, trying to follow someone's journey and what they're experiencing, and us inserting information that can support them along the way.
So when it comes to kind of the age demographics of the Team World Vision program, I know you've said it's a really diverse audience, from Gen Z to baby boomers to Gen X being your most engaged group. So can you talk a little bit about how you're customizing that communication strategy, for the different audiences? What messages are resonating with each group? What channels are working with each group? How are you kind of taking this big strategy and segmenting it?
Yeah. It's so tough. And I have to say, we're taking swings. We're taking some big swings, and sometimes we're making contact. Sometimes it's a foul ball. Sometimes we feel like it's a home run. But I think that's the thing, is like you're saying, as professionals, we want to hit a home run every time. We want to be efficient. We want to be effective. And we want people, again, to know what they're doing matters. And ultimately, we're hoping that the communication is clear, so that we're not getting tons of emails back. We're not getting tons of text messages or phone calls. We have this constant push and pull within our staff of, do we give people our actual phone numbers? And when are we talking to people? And do we have our own boundaries in our own lives for our own families? Because we have to recognize, as peer-to-peer fundraisers, when are people fundraising? Like at night on the couch.
At night. Yeah.
Totally. And when do they have those questions? At night on the couch, or, maybe during dinner, or things that aren't real, just convenient for us. But ultimately, again, if we're going to be along the journey for people, how can we find a healthy balance to be in communication with people? So I think first and foremost, we try to create that space clearly, that while we're a big organization, we can feel small and we can be personal. So as long as people know, like we were just talking about before we started recording, how do you silence your phone? Do you do work settings or focus settings, or do you have response emails? So I think we're always trying to say like, hey, we're here to communicate. We're here to touch base and as much as possible. And I'm going to be out for the next couple hours. So there's a lot of response mechanisms that we're using, automation, so people can know when we're free, creating office hours that are available for Q&A. We do webinars and team calls. We do those focused towards certain types of fundraisers, certain types of activities. We do national calls. We do event-based calls. We do fundraising calls. We do nutrition calls. And again, they might be podcasts, they might be webinars, they might be live, they might be recorded. We've done podcasts, so people can listen. And we also, everything that we do, we have them recorded as well. So people can take them on the run, so you might miss the team call or the captain call. But then when you're out running, you don't have to run by yourself, or when you're out walking, you don't have to be out by yourself. You can be listening as you go. But particularly too, like you were saying, different demographics. I think, we're trying with social media, we're doing posts, we're doing GIFs, we're doing stories, shorter videos, but trying to make them as authentic as possible. And I think one thing that really stood out to me recently, Marcy, was just really genuine skepticism, I'd say, from Gen Z and from millennials around large organizations. And who are you really? How is it that you do the work that you do? Where is the money that I'm investing really going? Because we have really been within a social awakening or upheaval over the last few years that is long overdue. And in a globalized world now, we're receiving more and more messages and understand that a lot of even our best intentions have not helped but hurt people. Right. So I think we're trying to be who we are as a large organization and not sway away from that. We've been around for 70 years. We work in nearly 100 countries. We're doing water work in 42. But that's also very messy when you have, we're working in conflict zones. We've had staff that have been killed. We have had staff that have been imprisoned while they're working with some of the most vulnerable people around the world. Just really tough situations, but we want to be as transparent as possible in those situations, while also protecting the people that we work for and work with. So I think that's a big point, though, that you can't just slap out statements all the time, but you have to be willing to have conversations. Like you're saying, whether it's a mom whose child's going through, a really hard time and going through treatment, just, how do we diversify the conversations? And I hate to say it to everybody that's listening because we want the easy answer, but I think the right answer is more personal answer, and recognizing that people don't always read their emails.
I completely agree, and I think there's this distinction between your brand as an organization and, being very buttoned up and, wanting to present the organization the right way, I'm using my air quotes, and the authenticity of the people that work for you. Right. Yeah. And you don't ever want your staff to feel so scared about saying the wrong thing that they don't build an authentic relationship with a participant, right? I had an old boss who used to say, the brand is the cumulative experience so it's not just the logo, it's the cumulative experience that you have with the organization. And that is going to include the staff members. That is going to include how they make you feel, how you feel connected to them. And I think when we rely on the crutch of just email, right? Email has a role 100%, as we just talked about. But when you rely on just that, you lose that personal connection. And it is okay for somebody to have a really great tie to you, Lindsey, which then ties them to Team World Vision and its mission. And that is okay.
Yeah. And I think too, Marcy, like you're saying, we can be frustrated sometimes that people are texting or calling or asking questions. But I think that while some of those things can be frustrating, that means they're engaging. That means that they're trusting you for an answer. So instead of frustration, like, can you turn that into excitement? Because if they're asking questions, that means that they're curious, which means that they're engaged, whether you're repeating yourself or not. That's a good thing.
Exactly.
And the other thing I think that's interesting that we're toying with a little bit is mail. Actual mail, like not just mailers, but again, thinking about people along a journey of an experience. How can we hit people with different touch points in different ways that are authentic and feel personal? But I mean, from Gen Z to a boomer, to actually receive something to you in the mail that is connection. Again, I think post-pandemic and just all the technology and was this text message actually from a person, or is this from a number? And what is this? Or, all the concerns about phishing now and our privacy, to actually receive something in the mail that is from someone. And again, it's not just the organization, but it's the person from the organization that you're together. I actually think that, like, heaven forbid, USPS could maybe have a comeback here. Like, there could be some excitement, with that level of personal connection, I
love it. I just was on my college campus just this past week, and there was a student who had just been accepted, and her acceptance letter was a pop-up greeting card that popped up a view of the campus.
Amazing.
And so she was there, taking her social media pictures because she was so excited, because not only was it a cool piece of mail, it was her way to celebrate. And so I think I completely agree with you that it's those small touches and I think can make a really big impact. So to your point about sometimes the best way is not the most efficient way, right? So when you're thinking about this very participant-centric communication strategy, it's not the most efficient when you have a small team, right? I think that's what, again, to talk about people's fears, that's what a staff member fears. How are you helping your team prioritize this very one-on-one, in-depth conversation that, again, may not be the most efficient?
Yes. Yeah. It's a great question. And it's always this push or pull. And I would say every one of our staff members is defining their own boundaries to some extent. And as managers and support staff, we're trying to create systems and structures around them so that they can basically, like with the force, can reach out their hand and get what they need. But like you're saying, with a small team, it's hard. So I think creating things that are personal to the experience. So whatever that experience is, whether it's a walk, whether it's a run, what's the journey that you want someone to go through, and what's the experience? And I'm going to say that maybe the hard thing for some people that are listening right now, you've got to do the thing that you're asking other people to do. If you are not fundraising, if you are not training, if you are not participating in the events that you're doing, I think that you are missing out for yourself, your own personal transformation, but I do think you're missing the boat for your people. So you just said make it easier, and I just made it maybe a little bit harder. But I will tell you, I don't think that that's true, Marcy, because my husband and I are training for a London Marathon right now, and it is a whole load of crazy. Like, we ran 20 miles on Saturday together. Our friends down the street took our daughter to the zoo with their kids, and our community is rising up around us, from donations to time to support. Our neighbors, who we've only lived here a couple of years, just donated $200. We're doing a wine event at the wine shop up the street because people are inspired and encouraged about what's happening. Why do I tell you all that when you're saying, Lindsey, it's a small staff, be efficient, do these things? Because now that I've had this experience, I can look at that 26 weeks and I can be marking that out over the 26 weeks experience I had, and create repeatable, I should say, tools that you can use every year. And yes, they have to be tweaked. Yes, they have to be shifted or changed. But from social posts to mail pieces to do a fundraiser, try this thing, go for a run, invite your community in. Again, it's personal, it's vulnerable, but now I can tell people very honestly, and for the next 10 years, hey, you've got a 12-mile run coming up. And I bet you're thinking, oh my God, this is going to be like 2 hours of my life. Who's going to watch my kids?
2 hours for 12 miles? They're fast.
Well, it depends on, all of us are a little different. And again, our people are non-runners. Like they have no idea what they're getting into. Here's a pro tip too. When you're scared about training, wear your clothes to bed. Wear them to bed. Because when you wake up, they're already on. And then you're stuck. Then it's like, well, you're making a decision. You're either getting out the door or you're not. I wish I would have worn mine to bed last night because I still haven't done my run this morning and I should have. But it was raining, Marcy. I didn't want to do it. Coming back to efficiency, those are the things you got to be honest about.
Right.
If you're honest about it and you can plug that in to something that's repeatable, it can become efficient for you,
I have learned so much, Lindsey. This has been fantastic. I've loved talking to you, hearing about all the great work that World Vision is doing around the world, all the great work that you're doing as Team World Vision. I am not a marathoner. I have thought about it many times. Maybe one day, not yet. But if there are people sitting there like me thinking, wow, this sounds really great, I might want to get more involved either with Team World Vision, or they might be thinking, hey, do they have any job openings? Because I'm thinking about that. Where can we send people? We'll put this in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so we like to say we're 1 foot in front of the others too, Marcy. So you can be 1 foot in front of the other in an orange jersey, and we're the orange party bus in the back.
That would be me.
Little spoiler alert, the medals are the same for the people in the front and the back. Right? You can enjoy this. Like you can pay for it, so you can enjoy it. So we just like to get it done, so that women and children don't have to. But with that, you can go to teamworldvision.org to learn more about our endurance program, about our 6K global event that happens in May every year, or our invitational program that has spots available to run things like you're saying, like New York and London and climb Kilimanjaro and whatnot. And then as far as World Vision's work and really partnering, potentially working with, it's worldvision.org is our US site to really understand how World Vision US is funding these projects all around the world through child sponsorship, one-time gifts, corporate sponsorships. And then if you want more of an international flair to see what work looks like, you can go to WVI, World Vision International, WVI.org to learn more. But ultimately, Marcy, I think the key to peer-to-peer fundraising is it is peer-to-peer. And while we can say that we have paid staff, that we're all part of the mission. There's only we. There's no us and them. It's only we. And we get to do this together and go farther together. And so I just appreciate you guys, you and David, and just the community of peer-to-peer fundraisers that you've created to really support making the world a better place and engaging people and reminding people that we have the power to make the world better. So thanks to you and the incredible work that you're doing. We so desperately need it, and we deeply appreciate it. And you're a joy, my friend. So thank you.
Well, so are you. I agree. You're too kind. And thank you so much for joining us today.
The P2P Soap Box is produced in partnership with True Story FM. Engineering by Pete Wright. Music this week is by Aves. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, we hope you'll consider doing just that for our show. But the best thing that you can do to support the P2P Soap Box is simply to share the show with a friend or colleague. Thank you for listening.